Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we know Scott Rollins made the Hall of Fame in the most recent vote, but who's going to be the next Philly to get in? And who on the team currently is a future Hall of Famer? We'll discuss on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phillies baseball for what feels like ever over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio, NBC Sports Philadelphia on the television side. So you can catch me on TV every once in a while over there. Credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, like YouTube, Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Go ahead and check us out all over the place here at Locked On Phillies. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And as we get started for today's episode, we're doing a little more Hall of Fame talk. Scott Rollins, as you know, he made it into the Hall of Fame via the Baseball Writers Association of America's vote. A couple days ago now, 2-3 days ago. I don't know. It's been a busy week for me, so I lose track. Earlier this week, we'll say, Scott Rollins made it into the Hall of Fame. The only player voted in that manner this year. Of course, Fred McGriff is going to get in as well via this new contemporary voting committee. So McGriff and Rollins will be the ones going in. Rollins, the only one voted on the actual ballot for players this year, though. So he goes in, and we had that whole debate about whether or not the Phillies can claim him and everything. A couple of people in the YouTube comments were saying they were saying yes, that the Phillies should claim him because of the amount of time spent here. Listen, I think it's a personal opinion as to whether or not you consider that player a Philly when they go in. And we know the Phillies will claim him because it's good for the organization to have Hall of Famers, and they can have all these special days and everything, and celebrate him. And it's fun to celebrate things. Just think back to this run by the Philadelphia Phillies. It's way more fun having things to celebrate, and you can never have too much to celebrate. So it doesn't bother me that the Phillies want to celebrate Scott Rollins. My question was about the legitimacy of it and how that felt to you as an individual fan. But we're moving on from that now. So Rollins in, we know that. There are a couple other guys on the ballot that are Philadelphia Phillies, no doubt. Bobby Abreu for sure. Jimmy Rollins, of course. Abreu seems to be heading in the wrong direction. I don't think Abreu is the next guy that gets in. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the next Philadelphia Phillie Hall of Famer. And not like a guy that might have been here one season and then just no, the next legitimate Philadelphia Phillie Hall of Famer. And who could it be? It's tough to say. I don't think Abreu's making it at all. I really don't think he has a path to make it in. I don't think he's garnered enough support, and I don't think he will. His numbers are pretty darn good. They're close. He has an argument, and that's why he stayed on the ballot, but I don't think he has a good of an argument to make it in as he does to just remain on the ballot until his time is up. Jimmy Rollins is an interesting one. I told you a couple episodes ago, or was it last episode? But I told you that Jimmy Rollins is a guy where you can make a campaign that would get him in the Hall of Fame. Will that campaign happen? I don't know. It'll take a lot of push from the fan base and media members and writers to say, okay, well, this is the year we're pushing for Jimmy because his numbers say this and he's this compared to other shortstops and all of this great stuff. But yeah, I feel like Jimmy has an outside shot, but it might take him a couple years. Ryan Howard is not going to make it in, unfortunately. He just didn't have – his peak was too short. And while his peak was better than Jimmy Rollins or anybody else on that Philadelphia Phillies 2008 core, he's a guy that he didn't have a long enough career, and he wasn't sustained good enough to be in the Hall of Fame. But he'll be on the ballot, of course. So let's look at that 08 core and some of the top guys and say who's going to make it in, who were the great players on that team that could end up in the Hall of Fame one day. Really nobody out of the bullpen. Brad Lidge was unbelievable that season. That season should be in the Hall of Fame, but Brad Lidge's career, not enough to get you there. No one else in the bullpen really puts you there. The starting rotation, I mean, no, I don't really see anybody there. Cole Hamels had a nice run. He's not a Hall of Famer. He's a very good major league pitcher that's been around forever, but he just not a consistent enough sustained success. And for position players, your sustained period, like your peak, could be like 7 years, and you could make it in. Like if you make like 6 All-Star games in 7 years and mix in a Gold Glove or a Silver Slugger or something, or like a couple Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers, and you also have the stat compilation. That's the type of peak from an outside Hall of Famer. Cole Hamels not Cole Hamels, but I should say pitchers rather. Pitchers, you got to be good for like a decade with some of these guys. Like think how long Scherzer's been good for. Think how long Verlander's been good for. Think how long Kershaw's been good for. And the numbers these guys put up. Like pitchers that make it in are workhorses because the stat compilation is unbelievable. And they also do it at a high level for those guys that are lock Hall of Famers. Cole Hamels not in, neither is anyone else on that pitching staff. So you move to the position players, and Worth isn't good enough. Victorino isn't good enough. And this is no disrespect to these guys. We were talking about the Hall of Fame, but Victorino's not a future Hall of Famer. Worth's not a future Hall of Famer. Carlos Ruiz is not. Phillie's over there. No, no one on the bench that turned into somebody good that was young on that team. No, really, the 3 guys on that team that have a shot to make it in, I've already told you Bobby Abreu isn't going to make it, are the big 3. Jimmy, Ryan, Chase. Here's the funny thing. I think it's Chase Utley. I think Utley's their next Hall of Famer. I really think he's got to be, because Jimmy has a long way to go to build that percentage up of votes to get him in. Chase Utley, though, with what he did offensively at the second base position, which is not a position where you see a lot of guys go in to the Hall of Fame, because you don't normally Hall of Fame numbers and second base don't normally go hand in hand. Second base is normally a nice defensive player, might hit for a little bit of power for like a 3 or 4 year peak at the middle of his career. Think Gene Segura. Gene Segura is a very good second baseman. His career trajectory is a very good second base. A couple of All-Star games, cleared the 300 threshold a couple times. He's going to have probably over 2,000 some hits in his career, as long as he plays long enough and stays healthy. Plays solid defensively, had a little bit of pop, still does. But, of course, that's going to trail off as he gets a little bit older. A nice player. We're going to remember Gene Segura very fondly here in Philadelphia. But compared to Chase Utley, Chase Utley was one of the biggest offensive threats in the league from that position, played outstanding defense, was a very intelligent player, a team leader, has the World Series to his name, played for a long enough time. He has a lot of stuff on his resume that says he's a future Hall of Famer. Ryan Howard, I said, won't make it. Jimmy Rollins, I think will one day, but I think it will take him longer than what it will take Chase to get in. So Chase could get on the ballot and make it in before Jimmy Rollins progresses to the point where he can get in. And it's a weird thing to think about, right? You think about that 2008 core, and maybe because of the world bleeping champions and the leadership that we know Chase Utley had and him being one of the top 3, we're like, oh, okay, I can see that. But you think about it, Ryan Howard won an MVP. Jimmy Rollins won an MVP. Chase Utley, the only one of the 3 that never won the MVP, and yet he's the lock Hall of Famer. Now, I'm not saying lock, but he's the one that's most likely to get out of the 3. How does that work? And frankly, what it shows you is the nature of the Hall of Fame. MVP carries some weight if you do it multiple times, but a one-off MVP season, and Rollins' MVP year was much more one-off than Ryan Howard. Ryan Howard had a 3-4 year stretch there that was just miraculous from 07 to 09. So he was really, really, really good. Rollins was more because to win the MVP, you got power numbers, and that wasn't really Rollins' thing, but he had it in, when he went 2006? Or no, was he after Howard? Why am I forgetting this? I'll look this up when I do the next ad read. But anyway, it's weird to me that Utley, the guy who never won the MVP, is going to be the more likely guy to make the Hall of Fame, but that's just how it works. He was more consistently good for a long time. He plays a position that it's easier to get in at if you put those high numbers up, and frankly, I think he does make it, and I think he is the next Philadelphia Phillie. So that's my next pick for Philadelphia Phillie in the Hall of Fame. But those are guys that are already done playing. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about people currently playing for the Philadelphia Phillies that are going to make it in. And you know what? There are a couple. There are a couple that are currently playing, a couple locks, a couple maybes, a couple probablys. We'll discuss. We'll break it down next, and this will be a fun debate. This is a fun back and forth that we can have in the comments too. We'll talk about it coming up on Locked On Phillies. Let me tell you about my friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sportsbook in America. That's right, FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They've got so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, you can join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props, all that good stuff. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Those are awesome. You can make so much money doing the same-game parlays by even putting together like let's say last night the Sixers played the Nets. If you were to go ahead and parlay like Joel Embiid and James Harden and Seth Curry and who else scored for them? Kyrie Irving all over like 20 points. Normally, if you'd bet one of those, maybe on Seth Curry, you'd make some good money. But all four of those together, well, you would have cashed and you would have hit big. Like same-game parlays are awesome. Go ahead and check all of it out. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, Jimmy Rollins won the MVP in 2007. Ryan Howard won it in 2006. I knew it was back-to-back years. I just forgot who had won it first. It's been a while, man. And that was 6th and 7th grade for me. So not exactly the clear memory of, like, I'll be able to tell you forever when Bryce Harper won the MVP award back there in 2021. That'll be burned into my brain forever. But I was a young kid, so I wanted to look that up. So I got it for you. Jimmy Rollins in 2007, Ryan Howard in 2006. And then in 2008, well, they got their World Series. So nice little stretch there for those folks and the Philadelphia Phillies. And that could be what we're heading into now. So I think one of those guys gets in, at least, if not Utley and Rollins together, which would be great. To me, the best double play duo in Philadelphia Phillies history is the Rollins to Utley combination. Count Howard there on the back end, but it'd be nice to see both of those guys make it in. Anyway, the current team. Who are some current Hall of Famers playing for the Philadelphia Phillies? We're going to go with locks, then we're going to go with probablys, then we're going to go with, hey, he's got an outside chance. First, absolute lock, Bryce Harper. There's no doubt. I mean, he's one of the players of a generation. He's got an MVP. There's a good chance he could win another one at some point in his career. He's going to have the stat compilation, especially with the creation of the DH now. Come on. Bryce Harper is a lock Hall of Famer. He's one of the superstars of this era. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He will be a no-doubter. He will garner over 85% of the vote. Bryce Harper is going to be a guy that no doubt gets in the Hall of Fame. And you know what? To be honest, that might be the first guy that I ever go see inducted, like I ever make the drive. I know I told you Roy Halladay was my favorite player, and you're probably saying, Connor, why didn't you go to his induction? It's unfair to his wife, but he wasn't there. If he was making that speech, I'd be there. But unfortunately, of course, we know he wasn't able to. Okay, not to get emotional there for a second. Anyway, Bryce Harper is going to be a lock Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about that one. That's no surprise to anybody. Bryce Harper will be a Hall of Famer. He's currently on this team right now. There's another one that I think is pretty damn close to a lock. Maybe you could put him in the probably they'll make it in. And he doesn't play. And he doesn't coach. Dave Dombrowski is going to be a Hall of Famer one day. That dude's resume is absolutely unbelievable. Unreal, especially now that he has the World Series appearance and the NL pennant with the Philadelphia Phillies. Multiple World Series, building teams up like nobody's business. He's one of the great executives of the past 20 years in baseball. He's going to make it in. Dave Dombrowski is going to be a Hall of Famer one day. And that's a pretty cool thing to be able to say. It's rare to see executives make it in baseball because it's a little bit different than manipulating the salary cap like you have to do in other leagues. It's a very unique. We talked about arbitration. We talked about Rule 5 over the course of this offseason. It's a unique league in the way that it operates and having all the minor league systems and everything. But Dave Dombrowski is so darn good at putting a contender on the field. That man's going to be a Hall of Famer one day. And he's your current president of baseball operations. So there you go. My one lock is Bryce Harper. My very probable is you're looking at Dave Dombrowski. There's another guy on the team that's in the bullpen that's probably going to be a Hall of Famer one day. I know you're probably racking your brain like, is it Dominguez, Jose Alvarado, Gregory Soto? Well, maybe Gregory Soto's still young, a couple of All-Stars already. Like, who's it going to be? Yeah, it's that new acquisition from the Los Angeles Dodgers this past year. Craig Kimbrell is probably going to be a Hall of Fame relief pitcher when everything is all said and done. He's only 34. He's probably got another good 5 years of stat compilation in him. And for a stretch back when he was closing for the Red Sox and the Braves, and he was really in his heyday as a reliever, he led the league in saves, I think 4 out of 5 years. He was unbelievable. Kimbrell was the gold standard of closers in baseball for half a decade. And that's a pretty important thing when you look at guys that make it in. It's hard for closers to make it in. You got to be really near the top of your game, and he's going to have to stay healthy. He's going to have to be pretty good for the next 5 years or so to get to the level where he makes it. But relief pitchers throw for a while these days. I do think Kimbrell's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. He's much more of a maybe. He'll be on the ballot, though, no doubt, and I think he's going to end up making it. Now, he won't go in as a Philly. Of course, it'll be relief pitchers are always weird too because they move around so much more often. Unless you're Mariano Rivera and you just live in New York and get paid billions forever. But so he won't go in as a Philly, but he will be a guy that currently plays on this team that will be in close consideration for the Hall of Fame. And there's one more that's an interesting one. This is very much a maybe, but projecting out, he's got a real shot. He's a position player. Plays in the infield. You're thinking, Trey Turner? I'm not ready to put Trey Turner there yet. Still young. Still got to figure some stuff out. Even though he's probably the best shortstop in baseball right now, you got a long way to go as far as a Hall of Fame resume. Bryce Stott, too young. Reese Hoskins, not enough defense. Not first base, you have to have transcendent power numbers. And he hasn't been doing it for long enough. Alec Boehm, no, doesn't have the power numbers. JT Realmuto has a real chance to be a Hall of Famer one day. That man is incredible defensively. He throws out base runners at an insane rate, even for the modern game, where people don't steal all that often. He steals bases himself. He's super athletic. He's got speed. He's a Gold Glove winner multiple times. He's a Silver Slugger winner. He's the best offensive catcher in baseball right now and has been for a couple years. He's the best all-around catcher in baseball. And catcher's an interesting position in that defense is of utmost importance, but what you see when you see guys make it in the Hall of Fame, Joe Mauer will be another interesting guy coming up who's on the ballot for the first time this year to see how they're evaluating catchers from this modern era of baseball. But JT's power numbers and just offensive numbers in general are so good for the catcher position. You add that on top of really, really good defense, and those are the types of guys that make it. Guys that play exceptional defense and play above average offense at the catcher's position stands out so much more because no catchers hit. You're there, it's a defensive premium position, so it's very rare to see somebody with the offensive output that JT Realmuto has. That man would go in the Hall of Fame as a Philly, and if he continues his offensive production from the catcher's position while also playing outstanding defense, like we know he's going to, he's got a real look at it. It's a crazy thing to say, but JT Realmuto could be a Hall of Famer one day. Those are the only guys on the team that I see really having a chance. I don't think Schwarber does enough. I don't think Nick Castellanos will ever get there. Trey Turner may. He's probably the next closest one. Nola, not enough year-end accolades. Wheeler, the same thing. Andrew Painter will probably be there one day. No, that's way too early to tell. Kid's 19. But, hey, we'll see how his career progresses. But, yeah, so let me know if there's anyone else you think is a future Hall of Famer for the Phillies. If there's somebody I missed that's glaringly obvious. If you think Rob Thompson's going to be there one day after he wins 6 World Series in a row, let me know. Jump in the comments on the YouTube or tweet at me, and we'll see. We're wrapping up. Next, final segment, Locked On Phillies. This final segment is going to be more of a preview segment. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be getting into in our next episode because there still is a glaring spot that the Philadelphia Phillies need to fill. They need outfield depth. The offseason's been awesome, right? And I'm going to dive deeper into this in tomorrow's episode. Offseason's been great. Very exciting offseason. Love it. Happy for the Philadelphia Phillies and what they've done. No complaints whatsoever. Well, maybe that last part isn't totally true. One complaint. If they're going into this season thinking Dalton Guthrie is your best option as a backup outfielder, I think you're nuts. I haven't seen anything from the kid that should say that he's a guy that, like, if Kyle Schwarber gets hurt, Dalton Guthrie's your everyday right fielder until Harper comes back post All-Star break. It's not a good situation in the outfield. They need to add another vet. And I don't really – we're going to break down in our next episode who's out there and available, who I think the Philadelphia Phillies should target, of who's out there and available, if maybe a trade is a possibility, something going on there, because you look at, they have kind of a backup of right-handed pitchers down in the minor leagues. Not that I think they should empty the barrel and trade all those guys for a guy who's going to be a depth outfield piece, but I'm saying you could move like a Griff McGarry and get somebody pretty nice for a prospect like that. So we're going to discuss who I think the Phillies should add in the outfield, because that is very much a point of concern for me when I look at this roster right now. It's the only point of concern, but it doesn't mean you can just not address it because you did really well with everything else. And it doesn't mean I'm worried about the Philadelphia Phillies this year or anything. Just for this team to look like solid all the way through. I look at this Eagles team that's playing for the NFC Championship game in a couple days, and I say, oh, they're solid everywhere. If they had just not gotten Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to address the safety position, they'd be a really, really, really good team with a hole at safety. And that wouldn't necessarily mean they'd even be out of the playoffs. They could be in the same spot. The point is, when I look at championship teams, they're normally solid across the board. And that's a spot of concern for the Phillies right now, the only one really remaining for me. So, hey, that's what I want to see addressed. And in the next episode, we'll break down exactly who's out there and realistic and available for the Philadelphia Phillies and who I personally think they should bring in. So we'll discuss that on tomorrow's episode. That's all for today's Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Lindsey Crosby does a great job covering the minor leagues, potential call-ups. A lot of new prospect lists are coming out right now. So to break down all of that information, check out Lindsey Crosby's work on Locked On MLB Prospects. It's available on YouTube, Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts, as is Locked On Phillies. Please continue to rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff for Locked On Phillies. It really helps me out when you do that. So hit that subscribe button right now. Thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.